How's it going, everyone? This is Bigsuga back with another video, and today I'm here to bring you some information on multiplayer aspects and Covenant information in Dark Souls 2. Let's go ahead and start talking about co-op. So we're going to have an item called the Name Engraved Ring in Dark Souls 2, where you and another friend or multiple friends will have to have this ring on and also be aligned to one of 10 gods. You must be aligned to the same god in order for this ring to work as intended. Now what the ring will do is make it so your friend will have a much easier time seeing your summon sign in his or her world. I think this is a fantastic change for people who are really struggling with a certain boss, for example, and they have a friend who's beaten this boss. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily happy with this because it introduces outside aspects into the multiplayer portion of Dark Souls and now Dark Souls 2, but I think this is a pretty good change. I remember, for example, a friend of mine had a lot of trouble with a certain boss, cough cough, Ornstein and Smo, and we spent about an hour trying to get my summon sign to appear in his world, which just never happened. This was obviously pretty frustrating because I was unable to go to his house at the time, for example, and help him out, and it would have been a million times easier for me, who I've beaten Ornstein and Smo countless number of times, to go into his world and just simply help him out. I don't necessarily think this is going to have any negative impact on gameplay. I only really think that it can be positive, so I'm two thumbs up about this change. Now, one thing that I don't necessarily agree with that From Software is doing in terms of multiplayer is they're putting the ability to have voice chat in co-op play in Dark Souls 2. I think this is a pretty bad choice because it really takes away from the whole loose connections thing. A lot more so than being able to play with friends from the Name Engraved Ring. Now, one way I think that they could sort of solve this problem, which I think would be something that they might need to do if it's not already in the game, is have a ring, for example, where both you and the other player would have to have this ring on and have voice chat enabled as a menu item in order to speak. Now this would be good just because it would take away from combat stats, so you'd either have the choice of, do I want to talk with the person helping me, or do I want to maximize my combat efficiency so there's pluses and minuses, instead of just having it be on and no discernible consequences to having voice chat with somebody in your party. Now, don't be worried because, as I said before, this is a co-op only option. If somebody invades your world and they try to talk to you, they won't be able to, which I think that's a very good decision. Now, all in all, I sort of still disagree with this, but I do trust From Software to balance this correctly. Now, we also have our standard white soapstones, where we actually have two versions of it in this game. We have one which is a smaller white soapstone and has a shorter summon time, and then the regular, which would be the larger version white soapstone, where you would be able to have those players be in your world for a good amount longer. So let's go ahead and start talking about covenants in regard to co-op. So there are two covenants which I feel a lot of people are fairly familiar with at this point in time. You have the Blue Apostles, otherwise known as the Way of Blue, and the Blue Sentinels. The Blue Apostles make it so that if you are invaded, a member of the Blue Sentinels, which is that second covenant, will be able to come to your aid. I think this is a fantastic feature now since you're able to be invaded while undead. And also, don't get confused because they are two separate covenants, however they are connected. We also have the Heirs to the Sun, which is going to be the Sunbro Covenant for Dark Souls 2. Now, I was super pumped when I saw this covenant show up in a couple of different gameplay pictures because I'm a Sunbro at heart. About 90% of the characters I have on Dark Souls 1 were Sunbros. I love helping people, so you guys can understand my enthusiasm when I found out that this same covenant of helping people and along the same lines as praising the sun, which we still have that same awesome pose, is going to be in Dark Souls 2. Now it's going to work, from what I understand, the same way that it did in Dark Souls 1. You're going to be summoned as a bright yellow phantom instead of a white phantom. compared to people who have the normal white soapstone. And also, your soapstone size is going to glow bright gold in other people's worlds to know that you are dedicated to helping people. Now, in sharp contrast to that, we also are going to sort of move into PvP, and starting out with PvP, the Brotherhood of Blood, otherwise known as the new Darkwraith Covenant. Now, after you defeat the Executioner's Chariot, there's a room that you can go into where there's a bonfire, and there will be a character there named Tiny Gren. And he is wearing the garb of the Brotherhood of Blood, and he's the one that propositions you to join this covenant. Now, this isn't the only way to invade other people in Dark Souls 2. You still have cracked red eye orbs for the occasional invasions. You don't completely have to join a new covenant if you just are having a bad day and you feel like invading people and just want to ruin people's games. Now, one thing that people who join this covenant might want to watch out for is the fact that when you invade people and if you kill the host, your sin will automatically be increased. Now, sin, I'm not sure if it's something that will be visible through an item, but it's going to be automatically tracked, and the higher sin you have, the more likely you are to be targeted by a sort of police covenant like the Blades of the Darkmoon. And I think that that's a pretty good system to balance out the ability to invade people while they're hollow. Now, we also have another PvP covenant called the Bellkeepers. It's uncertain where this area is, or we don't really have that much information about it. However, you're going to be tasked with guarding this area where there are twin bells, and supposedly these twin bells represent two lovers that can never be united, and you, I guess, protect this bond. Now, that's about it for covenants in regards to PvP, but there's also going to be an area in the game where you can fight others very easily. Members of their own covenant may fight other members of that exact same covenant, however, it's not yet known if this is going to be a requirement yet for the game. One thing I absolutely love about Dark Souls 2 is that the covenants are seeming to be a lot more accessible. Maybe just the online ones, but who knows, I guess we'll see. And there are a couple reasons that I think that this is going to be the case, because we've sort of already seen it. For example, when you're asked to join the Blue Sentinels, you're asked by a man sitting on an outcrop in front of a pillar, and there's strong evidence to suggest that this is taking place in the game's very first town, called Majula. We also have the Brotherhood of Blood, where, as I said before, is behind the Executioner's Chariot once you beat the boss. Now, I think this is one of the ways in which FromSoft said that they meant the game to be a lot more accessible than the first game. And if that's the case, then that's two pretty important co-op or PvP covenants that will be easily available to players and make online play a lot more engaging. For example, in Dark Souls 1, there was a lot of issues in terms of covenants being accessible. There were a couple that were pretty accessible, but apart from, for example, the Way of White, where you got it from Beatrice, and the Princess Guard, where you could get that from Guinevere, the others were fairly hidden and not that hard to find if you didn't know where to look. Now, outside of those two, we have a bunch of covenants which were not accessible at all. So, the Warriors of Sunlight was sort of accessible, sort of not, because you had to pray at a seemingly ordinary altar and have a faith requirement that wasn't stated anywhere, but you could lower that faith requirement by helping people using the White Slime Soapstone, because it lowered your faith requirement by 5 every time you did that, and that would be incredibly hard for someone to figure out if they didn't know that that was already there. So that one's sort of a toss-up between accessible and not accessible. So let's start off with the Blades of the Darkmoon. It's hidden behind a statue underneath the Annual Londo, and the only way to get there and be able to join the Covenant is you have to go to the catacombs, get a ring, put on this ring, go back to the seemingly unrelated place, and only then will the illusion of the statue of Gwyn go away. You can also do this by killing Guinevere and then requesting absolution from Oswald of Karim. those are the only two ways you can do that, and neither of those ways are they're not intuitive to a casual player or a new player who doesn't want to look things up. So next we have the Chaos Servant Covenant, which is hidden behind a wall underneath Kellogg's Bell Tower. We have the Darkwraiths, where you have to kill the 4 kings after getting the Lord Vessel before you talk to Frampt. Well, instead of talking to Frampt, I guess you have to talk to Kath and then go down to the entrance to Gwyn's prison, as Kath would say, and then you'll be able to join this covenant. So it's pretty out of the way, pretty hidden. Not a lot of people will know that. Then you also have the Forest Hunter Covenant, where it's behind a locked wall. You need expensive items to get past it. The Gravelord Servant Covenant, where you have to lay down a random coffin and wait. And then go talk to Nito, who is kind of scary because the whole time you think he's going to be an enemy. And then you also, last but not least, have the Path of the Dragon, which is very, very out of the way in a very unfun place. And you have to go through a bunch of hidden walls and go down this very, very tall tree where you could risk falling to your death. And it's very, very out of the way, a lot of trouble, and a lot of people wouldn't want to deal with it or think to do it or think that it would even be worth it. So anyways, that's about it for now. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.